Don't listen. Don't watch. You understand?
Your mother sucks cocks in hell, Paris.
The Exorcist is one of the best horror movies ever made. So of course, Warner Brothers wanted to make a prequel movie, because why wouldn't you? It was a pretty long road to production. They had a bunch of different directors sort of come in and get attached to the project. They had a bunch of different rewrites and a bunch of different writers. Eventually, though, they settled on Paul Schrader to direct. Paul Schrader, most known, I think, for writing Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, two of Martin Scorsese's best pictures. He's also a decent director in his own right. Eventually, the studio were presented with a rough cut of the film, and they hated it.
It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
Apparently, they said it was not gory enough, it wasn't scary enough, so they eventually decided to do some reshoots and rework it. Of course, Paul Schrader was not massively happy with this. Eventually, though, they decided to scrap Paul Schrader's version altogether and decided to get another director in. So they got rid of the man who wrote Taxi Driver and replaced him with the man who wrote and directed The Legend of Hercules.
I will not stop until I've returned the princess and avenged my loyal friend.
You did not have to do that. You knew you did not have to do that. How could you have done that? Can you live with yourself?
They basically decided to reshoot the entire movie and even recast a lot of the main actors, and they obviously changed the script up, got someone else to come in and give it another pass. Ultimately, they finished this version, and it released to critical and financial failure. It has an 11% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's rotten!
So after all of that nonsense, the studio eventually decided to run back to Paul Schrader. They allowed him to finish the movie. He was given a little bit of extra money, some very limited sort of time and resources in order to get his version of the film finished. So the next year, they released Dominion. And it was banned again.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a fascinating case because you now have two versions of this film, which in a lot of ways are incredibly similar and also incredibly different, and no one really likes either of them. I have to say, I remember watching them originally and hating both of them, but I must say, watching them back to back, I have a lot more of an appreciation for Paul Schrader's film. I think it's not amazing, but especially as compared to that original theatrical release, it's miles and miles ahead of that. So anyway, I guess I should probably talk about Exorcist, the beginning. So the story revolves around a younger Father Merrin being summoned by some random collector of artifacts to go over to a dig in order to search for a specific artifact. And it's weird because it opens with like an Indiana Jones homage, basically.
We believe a rare object waits inside. We'd like you to find it and bring it back to us.
So you think I'm a thief?
Now you think I'm a thief and a whore.
Part-time.
So he gets permission to join the dig site and ultimately ends up unearthing an evil that was buried in this church, and typical horror movie stuff happens. Exorcist, the beginning, has no subtlety.
God is not here today, priest.
It's spitting in the face of the original film. It's just going, right, how many jump scares can we fit into a 2-hour runtime?
Did I jump scare you? Yeah, I bet I did. You coward.
It's also weirdly, like, big. I think they wanted to make it kind of epic, and the music is so over the top and so overbearing. And this is also a moment where you'll realize that the special effects in this film are fucking god awful. The movie's also just sort of vulgar. They have this character in the film who's just like the grossest human being you've ever seen. It kind of feels like the studio were just like, right, we need some squeamish horror stuff. Just insert a character who is bursting at the fucking seams. I love how he's just like laying in her bed, like already. Like, how long has he been just like there staring at her? She wakes up for like a good few seconds and like he doesn't say anything. He's just there. There's a whole possession scene near the end of the movie, and it's so heavily lifted from the original film. Looks kind of like Linda Blair, only the makeup and effects are hideous. They are 1,000 times worse than a movie that came out like 30 years before this one. But, you know, you sit through the entire fucking hour and a half of this movie and you finally get to this sort of possession scene, and it's, I wouldn't say it's good, but it is still quite fun.
What's the matter, Mary? Don't you want to fuck me anymore?
Having orgies including goats doesn't make them possessed, simply horny.
It's lame and it's cheesy, but it's the only part of the film that's actually fun, that I actually enjoy watching when I'm watching the movie, because the rest of it is just so laboured and full of bad acting and bad effects and terrible cliche like horror movie shit.
Goodbye, Mr. Sommelier.
Au revoir, Mr. Mirren.
It's Father Mary.
So, Paul Schrader's version is a damn sight better, and it might not be immediately apparent. Unless you've watched them back to back, I think you would probably not enjoy this movie.
Don't ever touch me with that again, priest!
Immediately, it's so much more expedient with how it delivers exposition. The very first scene of the movie is actually a very compelling one.
With you.
Stop!
You have some objection, Father?
In God's name, you cannot do this.
You choose.
What?
All of the characters feel so much more respectfully handled. The doctor character, who was Sarah in the original film and is now Rachel in the Schrader film. Rachel actually has more of a sort of personality, and she's a bit more sure of herself, and the scenes that we have with her, they just feel so much more like fleshed out and so much more real and genuine.
I was in a processing center for confiscated items. It's amazing what you're capable of when your physical survival is at stake. Things you think you could never endure.
This movie's not perfect, I will say. There are elements of this film that are, again, quite cheesy and camp, kind of unintentionally silly or over the top.
This sucks, man.
There's no like stupid twist in this movie. It's pretty sort of clear from the off, like who's gonna get possessed. I like the fact that the Paul Schrader version does not feel the need to reference the original movie loads. In Exorcist the beginning, they obviously have the Pazuzu statue and they have the possessed person look reminiscent of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. There's also some interesting expressionist stuff going on. There's some abstract dream sequences in the film, and they're not particularly well done, but the attempt was made. It just feels so much more well-rounded. It feels so much more like it knows what it is. The biggest problem with the movie is that it isn't scary, and there's part of me that does really respect that, because I consider the original Exorcist to be more of a drama than a horror movie. I don't know, maybe that's a problem with Schrader's version, is that it's just not scary. It doesn't really even seem to attempt much in the way of like, oh, fear, and when it does, it kind of falls flat again. Schrader's version is ultimately the better film, although it must be said, I don't think either of these movies are particularly worth your time. Honestly, I think they're just both kind of a bit boring. I think that's their biggest crime, is that not a whole lot happens in either of the films. But this should be a lesson to all studios. If you sign off on a script and you sign off on a director, you should probably just, have faith in them to deliver a final project. So thank you, Warner Brothers. I'm really looking forward to the Exorcist sequel that you're making, and that's going to be out in a few weeks. I really know that one's going to be a massive pile of dog shit.